Welcome back. This is going to be rambly and probably very incoherent, but we're going to go for it anyway. On Tuesday, we talked about the Year of Chaos as a phrase, as a marketing ploy, and whether it was actually a real thing or not. And my conclusion was that, effectively, no, it's not a real thing, but Games Workshop also didn't say that it was. It seems like it was a fairly innocuous throwaway phrase used a grand total of twice, and then it just seemed to balloon from there. Something that I found super interesting was reading through the comments on the video, and people swearing that they heard it on certain streams. There was quite a few people who were absolutely sure that it was used when the various Monogod codexes were unveiled, like the roadmap for those. Them kind of going, like Games Workshop saying, okay, here's the next three, and then here's the three Chaos God codexes. And so many people thought that when they said, here's the three Chaos God codexes that are coming out, that was the point at which it was the Year of Chaos. And even having put that section of the stream in the video, like having watched it back and placed it in the video, the number of people who could have sworn that that's where it came from was genuinely surprising. There's also the idea that it's been in a bunch of articles, but there's no evidence of that either. And articles that people have brought up and said, hey, it was definitely in here, Games Workshop might have removed it, you can go back and look using Wayback Machine and find that there was no mention from the day it was published either. So it's very, very interesting just how far it spread, and why it spread is still something of a mystery, but it is not necessarily something that Games Workshop was pushing themselves. But there are a few people that said that it's almost like it's become a rallying cry for Chaos players as a whole. A way to kind of voice dissatisfaction with the way that Games Workshop treats Chaos as as a faction within the game of 40k itself. Now, I find that super interesting. I would say that it being used as a rallying cry muddies the waters slightly, because there are plenty of people who think it was a real thing that Games Workshop definitely pushed as like a hard marketing tactic, which it doesn't seem to be that at the very least, which in some ways makes it more complicated, because you will have people going, well, I'm saying this in an ironic way because Games Workshop has, in many people's eyes, dropped the ball when it comes to, say, Thousand Suns and World Eaters. Yes, Emperor's Children got their release, they got a whole new bunch of stuff. They also don't have access to a ton of stuff from the Chaos Space Marines, like the vanilla side of things, which is its own separate issue that a lot of people have, and one that I totally understand. But the kind of use of, so much for the Year of Chaos, when there are people who really do think that there was supposed to be a Year of Chaos, when that doesn't seem to be something that Games Workshop ever said in the context of 40k releases, at least, given that the first use of it was September of 2024 in reference to AOS. Like, it's become a sort of muddied way of being a rallying cry. But I understand why the rallying cry exists. And this is something I found super interesting. It's something that I think I agree with, to be fair. When you look at the Monogod releases for Chaos, there is a weird disparity going on. There is this really odd kind of mix of what certain things, like which factions are allowed what and why, and how they've been updated, and how many waves they've had, and things like Nurgle, like the Death Guard, look hugely inflated as a faction because they have a few things that the others don't. One is an absolute, I would say a possibly silly number of characters. It might not be that silly, but when you compare it to like World Eaters, Thousand Suns, and now Emperor's Children, feels like the Death Guard have got quite a few characters lying around. There's also the fact that they have their own faction-specific vehicles, something which no one else got, aside from World Eaters and the Lord of Skulls, but even then the Lord of Skulls is a holdover from previous editions. It's not like Games Workshop that sat down and went, okay, we're doing World Eaters, we're doing them as their own codex. They need to have their own unique vehicle, what shall we do? Oh, we've had the idea for the Lord of Skulls. No, that thing's been around for donkey's years, so that's kind of, if anything, they have inherited something from previous editions as opposed to got something purpose-built for when their codex first launched, right? Same thing with Thousand Suns, where it just kind of feels like there's supposed to be another wave, and there isn't. there's just not been another big wave of Thousand Sons stuff. So when you look at the Death Guard stuff and then look at everything that's come after, it's felt increasingly pared down as it goes, which obviously doesn't feel good. And it doesn't feel good, especially when you compare it to how Space Marines are treated and how their various sub-factions are treated. So something that has really rankled is that among the Emperor's Children releases, there's also the announcement of the Space Wolves refresh, right? Where the Space Wolves, a good chunk of their stuff is being updated and refreshed. And I think there's something to the idea of feeling dissatisfied with what Chaos is getting compared to, say, what Space Wolves are getting, when you consider what can actually be taken by Chaos sub-factions compared to Space Marine sub-factions. So when it comes to limiting factors on say, like Space Wolves or Blood Angels or Dark Angels or whatever, there aren't as many restrictions in place as to what they can take from the main Space Marine Codex compared to what, say, Emperor's Children can take from the main Chaos Space Marines Codex. There are some significant limitations. And whilst Emperor's Children can take things like Demonettes, Demons of Slaanesh, as a whole, that in itself is its own problem, because the Chaos Demon side of things seems to be going away and being made so that you can only take demons of that specific god with, like, the Chaos Space Marine side of things. Like, it feels like Chaos Demons are being shoved to one side and being split open and split away and just not being their own unique individual army. But you can still have them, but you can still have them related to this other thing. So even when it's a case of looking at those other codexes and going, okay, well, Emperor's Children can take Demons of Slaanesh, that's something, it still feels like Demons of Slaanesh as its own entity is at risk of being taken away. So even when you get the thing, Chaos as a whole is losing something in the process, if that makes sense. And I can absolutely get the feeling of dissatisfaction. I 100% can. It's one of those weird things where it feels like it's a repetition of things that we've said before, where, like, Space Marines get a lot of additional support. It feels like there is certainly a perceived idea of them simply getting more stuff more often than anyone else. But then again, that would also make sense because they seem to sell better than everything else. But then of course they would, because they keep getting more stuff than other factions. So why would they not sell better? It's that thing of, well, people are buying it more, so we need to support it more, but in supporting it more, you're providing more for people to buy, and people are buying it more, and then you go round and round and round. And that's where I think a lot of the animosity, the frustration, I think is probably the better word, isn't it, comes into it, where it kind of feels like, okay, but if you applied this much to everything else, that would probably work, right? Of course, there's no way to know that without actually doing it. And when it comes to things like Emperor's Children, the size of that range, it's very easy to look at that and then go, okay, well, this is all new, this is really great. We've got this new Chaos sub-faction, effectively. But, at the same time, it looks like Space Marines, once again, have to get the same. They have to have something. Every time Chaos gets something, you know, your standard Space Marines also have to get something. And I think there is potentially something to that. And I think there is absolutely no question that is frustrating in some ways. But then at the same time, there's also the same argument of, like, okay, but Emperor's Children getting stuff is only fine for people who want to play Emperor's Children. If you're playing Chaos Space Marines, that's no good for you. The same also applies to Space Marines as a whole. You know, Dark Angels getting stuff, that doesn't matter to you if you're only playing Ultramarines, or White Scars, or Raven Guard, or Iron Hands, or Imperial Fist. Blood Angels getting a subpar release doesn't matter to you if you're playing Space Wolves. However, if you are playing Space Wolves, where your range has been relatively untouched for a while now, having a massive update makes a huge difference, which, funnily enough, is the same feeling and the same process and the same appreciation that you get if you're playing World Eaters, and World Eaters get a proper release. It'd be nice if World Eaters got an update, And this is, I think, again where some of that frustration comes in, right? Things like Space Wolves getting new Terminators, and you got the Head Takers, and you got all this other stuff, and World Eaters, whilst they have enough to play, like to collect an army to play a game, it's not a huge amount of variation there, and it's missing things that people were kind of hoping for, like their own version of Terminators, which again, missing for Emperor's Children too. So, I don't know. I can understand why this whole thing of like, oh, so much for the Year of Chaos, why it's become something of a rallying cry. And I do think that there are some genuine and sensible reasons to feel like that, you know? To feel as though Chaos as a whole is being neglected. To feel that there are ranges within the Chaos umbrella that just aren't getting what they should be getting at this point. But at the same time, there are those who really did think that this was going to be the Year of Chaos, who are getting caught up in the idea of, well, we were told that we were going to be getting a bunch of stuff. What is this? And then when you look at like the pacing of it, it's very easy to think that it would be, because of getting so much Chaos stuff all condensed together, even though what is being given is not necessarily what the people who are playing those factions are actually hoping for. It feels like a big, jumbled, confused mess, but buried within the core of it, there are understandable and valid feelings of frustration with how certain things are handled, when it comes to releases, when it comes to the number of models, when it comes to the ranges as a whole. So, I mean, I guess this video is more just like acknowledging that I've seen all of that, acknowledging and reading it, and I'm not trying to argue that Chaos shouldn't have more, or that Games Workshop should spread their attention in a way that is more satisfying to the fan base as a whole. That's not what I was aiming for with the original video about the Year of Chaos, but I found it super interesting reading through all of that, and I guess this is kind of a response to it, although frankly this video is a mess. So I hope there was something in there that made sense. I think it did. I'm pretty sure it did. Yeah, I'm sure that's fine. Look, you will let me know what you think in the comments down below. You always do. Thank you very much for watching. If you did feel that the Year of Chaos was a genuine marketing thing from Games Workshop and you now realise it's not, good. If you're using it as a rallying cry, I totally understand why. It might muddy the waters a little bit, but I get why you'd do it. And if you're a World Eaters player or a Thousand Suns player, yeah, your ranges need to be bigger than they are. Even if it's just a few vehicles for each of you. Why have Nurgle got three vehicles for Death Guard, and then for some reason no one else can build vehicles? Like, what? I don't get it. I don't understand it. Probably never will. But I'm with you. I understand that, at least.